So, the purpose of the Spotswood Society is really to present and interpret the history of historic campus, the College of William and Mary, and the Wren Building, and to give tours and presentations that allow us to present this history to outsiders and to other members of the college community. And I think this is super valuable because there's a lot of history here, and there's a lot of important people in the founding of our country, and there's a lot of important people we don't talk about, from all the slaves who helped build and maintain and run the college, to the first women who joined, to the individuals who helped run our country and who fought in wars and who served in government, and all these people. And we help maintain this history and help present this history and help interpret this history in a way that makes it easy for everyone to understand.
Our unofficial purpose is to kind of be like student ambassadors for the Wren on campus and in the community, because we share the history with students and the community. And I also, as a member of the Spotswood, I really like to encourage fellow students to spend more time in the Wren, because I feel like everyone knows what it is on campus, but they don't necessarily spend a lot of time there. And I like to encourage people to take a class, study in the Wren, something like that, because I think it's so cool that for the entirety of William and Mary's history, the Wren Building has been a functional building with classes and student life happening. So it's kind of like we are creating and adding to the history of the Wren as current students.
So retelling William and Mary's history in 2020, which is a year of so much, just to put it simply, it's really important because it's, again, reestablishing that narrative. It's making sure that we're unbiased in our perspective, including the viewpoints of others, because so much of our history has excluded people, and that's really unfair. We're looking at a time in 2020 when prejudice is rampant, and that's not fair. We need to be able to include that we are fair, that we're inclusive, and we're trying to grow from our history, which as Spotswoods, we're laying the groundwork for this narrative, and as students, that's something that's really important for us to do.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight as part of Family Weekend 2020. We're so glad that you could join us, even if we were physically apart. The guided lantern tours of the Wren Building are one of Family Weekend's greatest traditions, and we are so excited to share the Wren Building with you. The Spotswood Society is a group of student volunteers that are designed to give tours of the historic campus.
To begin your tour, I'll start with telling you a little bit about the history of the College of William and Mary and the Christopher Wren Building. The college was founded in 1693, and construction on its original building, the Wren Building, started in 1695. The building was supposedly designed by Christopher Wren, and in the early years of the college, served as the dormitories, the classrooms, and the dining hall for all of the students who went to William and Mary. The school was originally an Anglican school, but has since become a public university since 1906. We'll start off the tour with the chapel.
Welcome to the William and Mary Chapel. When William and Mary was originally constructed, the chapel was not a part of the original design. It was an addition added in 1732. When William and Mary was originally chartered, there was an Anglican School of Divinity written into the charter, which meant that the boys would begin and end their day every day with a service in this chapel. After the American Revolutionary War, William and Mary severed ties with the Anglican Church and developed an informal relationship with Bruton Parish Church, the Episcopal Church here in Colonial Williamsburg.
In 1906, William and Mary severed ties with the Episcopal Church when it sold itself to the state after going bankrupt, and it became a public university that was no longer allowed to be affiliated with a religious group. Now the space is used as an interfaith space by multiple denominations and religious groups on campus. So beneath our feet are some very important Virginians who are buried here. Those include Bishop James Madison, cousin to former United States President James Madison, Lord Botetourt, and John Randolph. Some special pieces within here include the original pieces, such as the organ, the crest, and the chandelier.
Now we'll take you to the next stop on the tour. Come on.
Welcome to the Great Hall. This is actually my favorite room in the building because it has so many fun facts attached to it. Now, back in the day, the Great Hall would have looked much different. At one point, it was separated into 2 floors. Right below the windows here, which it would have been where the floors were divided. On our feet right here would have been a science laboratory, and right above us would have been a library. Now, the Great Hall is also the site of 2 of the 3 original fires in the building. Rather unlucky history, but that's just how it is, unfortunately. Now, the first fire in 1705 would have started just below our feet in the basement when a candle was knocked over, and the second fire started as a result of a lab experiment gone wrong here on the first floor.
The portraits adorning the walls of the Great Hall represent some of the notable people associated with the College of William and Mary. We have George Washington, the first American Chancellor of the college, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, and John Tyler, future U.S. presidents who all attended the college, as well as portraits of both King William III and Mary II of England, who gave their name to the school when they chartered it in 1693, and the first president of the college, Reverend James Blair, who was president for 50 years. Above me, and the only working fireplace in the entire building, we have a portrait of Queen Anne, Mary's sister, who donated funds to rebuild the college after the 1705 fire. There's also a bust of Thomas Jefferson above the doors we entered through that was gifted to the college by the French government after World War II in 1949.
So today, the Great Hall hosts a variety of campus activities, including a cappella concerts, lectures, induction ceremonies for honor societies, and even classes. I was lucky enough to have a special class in the Wren Great Hall for my freshman history seminar, where we were learning about English country dance, and we got to come into the Great Hall, spread out, and learn a couple of the different dances. At the end of the fall semester, the Great Hall is also hosts the Yule log ceremony, which is one of our most cherished campus traditions. The entire campus community gathers outside in the Wren yard and receives a sprig of holly, and then one by one, the students come into the Great Hall and throw their sprig of holly into the fireplace behind us to signify the end of the fall semester and to cast their woes away. It's a really special time for our campus community to come together, and it's one of the reasons that the Great Hall is one of my favorite rooms in the Wren, and we're so glad that we could share it with you.
We will now exit out through the piazza out to the Bradford.
We've now stepped outside onto the historic campus proper. When the college is founded in 1693, it's founded on 330 acres of land, but for the first 150 years of its history, only the historic campus was developed. And the historic campus comprises 3 buildings: the Wren Building, the Brafferton behind us, and the President's House across the way, which comprise the most complete colonial campus in the United States.
The Brafferton Building was built in 1723 to house the Indian School, which was associated with the Church of England in order to Christianize local Native American boys. The church, once it broke away from the school during the American Revolution, ceased to fund the school, and so therefore the building was repurposed as a cafeteria, as a dormitory, and also now houses the provost and the president's offices.
Across the way is the President's House, built in 1732 and 1733. It has housed every president the college has had with one exception, including our current president, Catherine Rowe, and her husband. A fun fact about the President's House is that in 1781, after the Battle of Yorktown, the French army actually burned down the roof of the President's House, and then the French government had to fund the restoration and rebuilding of the roof that we see today.
Over on the south side of the campus is the plan for the Memorial to the Enslaved, which will break ground in February this year. The Memorial to the Enslaved has been planned since 2014 and plans to be in the shape of a hearth, and will show how the college was built and maintained by enslaved persons for its first 150 years.
So I got involved in the Spotswood Society because I'm really drawn to the history of the William and Mary campus, and specifically the history of the Wren Building. I actually, in the first time I ever visited Williamsburg and William and Mary, I got to have a tour of the Wren Building with a member of the Spotswood Society, and it was really a fun memory for me. And so once I got to campus, I was still kind of interested in the Wren history, and one of my friends asked me in the spring semester if I was going to apply to the Spotswood Society, and I was like, absolutely. So I applied, and now I'm a senior, and I've been in the organization for 3 years, and it's been a really fun experience.
So I think the time period of William and Mary's history I'm most interested in would probably be the 1920s, because that was a time of a lot of growth for William and Mary. Obviously, not everyone was included in the narrative at that point, and we still had several more years to go until people were included in that narrative, but that's when you start to have women coming on campus. They're starting to become part of that knowledge base, which is really important. So it was a time of growth. They're starting to open the doors to more people to receive that education and contribute to academia, which is so important, especially in such a drastic time like today, where so many people are having to struggle with that, right?
One of the reasons I joined the Spotswood Society really is to learn. I think there's a big misconception about the Spotswood Society and William and Mary in general, is that you need to approach everything already as an expert, and I think that's just not true. So much of our training in the Spotswood Society is about learning facts for the first time, and I've really enjoyed learning so much about the Wren Building and historic campus, and it's really made the whole experience more magical for me. And I think that one of the best parts of the Spotswood Society is that we have so many different types of students. We have physics majors, math majors, English majors, and history majors, really everything. And not every student is an amateur historian.
My favorite known fact about the Wren Building goes back 2 years when I was here working in the Wren Building as a proctor over the summer, and also here in Williamsburg doing an archaeological field school. That summer they were expanding the sidewalk that leads from the sunken gardens up to the Wren Building, and as they were digging down to relay the base for the sidewalk, they found an 18th century drainage pipe down there with a door as the entrance that looked like a door to kind of like a haunted cave, and nobody knew it was there, and it was just really exciting to stumble upon this new archaeological fact in the Wren courtyard. And then as an aspiring archaeologist myself, it was really cool to get to watch them excavate the site all summer. From my spot in the information center, when I did rounds of the building, I got to come out and ask the archaeologists what they were doing, and they even let me down into the hole one time to see inside of the pipe. And not many students know that there's an 18th century pipe just in the courtyard out there under the sidewalk that they walk across so many times each year.
My favorite room in the Wren Building, I think, is the chapel. There's so many sweet memories there, but my favorite would be this one tour I gave to this lovely elderly couple. They were celebrating their 50-something anniversary. They were both alumni. They were incredibly sweet. They gave me lots of compliments on my tour, which felt great, but it was so adorable watching them walk into the chapel and just relive that memory again. The husband was taking photos of his wife, and it was very cute. He showed me a picture of them on their wedding day, and I felt so special being able to take part in that memory with them.
Okay, so my favorite tour memory is actually giving a tour to my own family over family weekend in my sophomore year. So it was when I first joined the Spotswood Society, was learning a lot of new stuff about the Wren, and it was just really fun to kind of share the information with them and also share the space, because I really like the Wren Building and spending time there. And we also met another lady who kind of joined in on the tour as we were going along, so it was just kind of fun to share the experience with my family.
So my favorite room in the Wren Building would definitely be the chapel. A big reason of that is, like you were told earlier, it's now a non-denominational building, so it's used for all sorts of purposes. I've been to guitar concerts in the chapel, I've been to lectures, sat through classes, and given lots of tours of the chapel. One of my favorite tour memories was the day that I was warned 2 minutes before my tour shift that there were 50 10-year-old boys waiting for me to give them a tour. And I kind of had a mini panic attack at that moment because it had kind of been a long day for me and I just wanted to sit on the bench downstairs. But instead I had to lead 50 boys around the Wren Building, and I could tell they weren't super interested at first in the history of the Wren Building, but when I took them to the chapel and I mentioned that there's a crypt underneath, they all of a sudden became really animated and started asking all sorts of questions about who was down there, if they were standing on the body, where they were standing, like where they were located. And it just, even though that, like, I just really enjoyed getting to like see them become actually excited about history after sitting through the beginning of the tour, which I could very much tell they were not as interested in. It was just fun to get the kids kind of involved even in that part of the history and tell them a little bit about the people buried down there.
I think the telling of William and Mary's history is so important in 2020 is because the history of the school and the history of our country are inseparable. So many of our founding fathers were educated here, and that's both an honor and a responsibility to deal with the worst parts of our country's history, and that's really our responsibility to contextualize that. We celebrated 100 years of women on campus just a few years ago, and we've had African American students on campus for just about 60 years. And I think that it's so important in the national conversation that we're having to recognize the role that William and Mary played in that. We had a big part in the institutionalized slavery in this country, and I think it's important that we contextualize that, and that process has just begun really in the last decade, and I'm excited to see that play out on campus with our new memorial to the enslaved that is beginning in the spring.